Now, Nigeria's Minister of Power said the power holding company of Nigeria has ceased to exist after the federal government formally handed over the physical assets of 14 PHCN successor companies to their new owners. In an exclusive interview with the managing director of Nigeria Bulk Electricity Trading Company, Rudumdaka Wonodi, CNBC Africa's Umu Ibrahim discussed the government's efforts to ensure that investors in the power sector deliver on their commitments. Let's take a look.
I think that this is a great day for the country, and it begins to allow the country transition to where exactly the reform is, which is hand over the industry to private sector operatorship and then begin to see the gains of private sector exactitude in the way things are done. You know what has been happening in the last few years is setting the commercial framework, putting the regulatory framework, the policy framework in place, and then inviting the private sector to come and operate in such an environment. So we should begin to see the gains of this as the private sector settle to business.
Now, opening up the country's power sector to investors, it is a step, many believe, towards economic development in the country. But is it just enough to hand over, the assets of the power holding company of Nigeria to investors in this sector, or what else should we be expecting?
Well, handing over, privatization is not a destination. That's one thing that we have to realize. So the fact that you've privatized is not where we want to go. Privatization, we believe, it's the pathway to having a nation that has the power it requires to drive its economy and make sure that the standards of living, manufacturing and things are raised to world-class standard. So we should expect that the private sector begins to drive efficiency, make the investments that are required, especially in distribution and generation, and that way begin to offer people better services. But in the immediate terms, what we should see is that for distribution companies, we would like to see some predictability of power. So you might not have all the power, but you can begin to have a method of rationing the power. It's one of the frustrations that people have seen in the past. We want to see some, better customer service, where if you live in a particular area, you can begin to get an idea when you expect power, and then you can plan around your life, manufacturing and things like that. And then you can also zone power to industrial areas during the day, and then residential areas during the night when people are there. So there should be some better customer service. And it also allows the regulator the latitude to enforce regulations.
Now, what else do you think the investors should be promising Nigeria? Because if we're talking about continuity, is this likely? Are we likely to see a light at the end of the tunnel? Because the minister was just saying they've invested a lot and they would want to be sure they get their returns back. Is it just about getting their profits and returns back, or giving Nigerians what they actually want?
I think that what you see here is a mutually beneficial relationship. Where we are now in power supply per capita, it's extremely low compared to other countries. So the growth of power, both in generation and in distribution, is actually why people are making these investments, that they're looking at the potential. So you would expect that they continue to invest, and therefore they will generate more revenue and the consumers will have more power. So at the end of the day, it's a mutually beneficial thing. You should expect more investment and then more power to homes and businesses.
Now, it seems like, the Nigerian government is very confident in these investors. What kind of policies do you think should be in place to ensure that these investors actually, fulfill their promises of delivering to Nigeria?
When I said that one of, there are three things that you want to put in place. There could be more of them. You want to have a commercial framework, you want to have a regulatory framework, and you want to have a policy framework. Those are in place. So the ministry and the government, the act is out there, the roadmap to power is there. Then you have the regulator and all the regulations around the industry, licensing terms that people have to meet. Then importantly, then you have the commercial framework where you have the bulk trader, you have the transmission company, you have the generation company. So to the extent that all these investors have entered into contracts, then the sanctity of contract will prevail, the license terms will be there, and then there's a policy framework that backs it. So it's not a matter of just handing it over and then people are going to walk away. There are contracts in place that people will need to adhere to. There are terms and conditions of licenses that people, investors and participants need to adhere to, and then there is a policy framework that guides it, and there are laws around it. So to a large extent, the framework is in place. What is important is also for the consumer group, the people, to